Hi, everyone, and welcome to the week ahead. I'm Tony Nash. Today, we're joined by Rudy Havenstein, Tracy Shuchart, and Albert Marko. We're really fortunate to have Rudy today. And Rudy, I appreciate you taking the time. Albert, Tracy, as always, I appreciate your commitment here. We're going to have a pretty high-level conversation today. Given some of the things that Rudy covers, we're not going to go into specific kind of market segments or other things. We're going to cover a few key things. First is U.S. and domestic geopolitics. Second is the Fed and kind of the managed economy. I don't think it's kind of anymore. It's pretty managed. And then we're going to go into some aspects of market dysfunction. I think these things are going to overlap quite a lot. Guys, thanks again for taking the time. I want to start with U.S. politics and geopolitics. And of course, U.S. election is underway. And, you know, my view of where we are in the U.S. election is that we're at the tail end of baby boomer influence. And that handoff from baby boomers to whoever, whether it's Gen X or millennials or whatever, is really messy. And it's been messy since 2016. When I was at The Economist in 2008 and I saw Obama elected, I said, okay, this guy's going to be in for 2 terms, but the next election is going to be kind of a joke. And it really was. Hillary and Trump, like, no offense to either one of them, but it really was kind of a cartoon show. And ever since then, because my view is because boomers just won't let go of power, we've got these, we've got guys like Trump who are 80 years old, and then we've got someone like Harris who, I mean, she's really hasn't ever made a political decision in her life. So we've got kind of a really surreal election ahead of us, or we're in the middle of it. I'm curious what you guys think. Rudy, can you, I love the political content that you post because I don't think you're necessarily with either team. Everyone is equal opportunity mockery, right? So
yeah,
can you walk us through
I don't
some of
have
your
a
views on that stuff?
yeah. Hey, thanks for inviting me. I don't have a horse in this race. I mean, I almost never do. I mean, to be honest, the person I voted for the most over the years for president was Ron Paul. And of course, the GOP hated him probably more than the Democrats did. So, but he's, as I say, he's been right on foreign policy and monetary policy, I think, forever. But in my opinion, there's a guy named Michael Tracy who had a great comment the other day about Kamala Harris. He said, it was something like, say what you will about Hillary Clinton, but she went through a grueling, primary process in which she had to debate formidable people. And, she really, and of course, she has a lot of, other experience. You couldn't say that she was inexperienced or that she wasn't, smart, whatever you think of her. And I think that's a good point. With Kamala was, she was picked because she looks the exact opposite of Joe Biden, and as VP. I mean, I think that's absolutely true. And the thing is she has not gone through any sort of vetting. When she ran for president in the Democratic primary, she couldn't get 1 or 2% of the votes. So I don't think anybody in the party likes her. My gray swan thing is maybe she's not the candidate. Maybe because I'm surprised there hasn't been. I mean, maybe there's an agreement or they're writing this election off. I don't think they are because they have so much money. But I'm surprised. Can you imagine being Hillary Clinton and looking at this going, she's going to be the first female president? You know what I mean? That's got to be eating her alive. And she's still young enough she could run, and she'd get a lot of votes like last time. It was a close election. So that's the way I look at it. I phrase it as I understand why people don't want Donald Trump. Totally understand that. I know people on both sides of that, but I don't understand anybody that wants Kamala Harris. So you know what I mean? So it's like, I'll write in, Tony Nash or something,
Oh, please
or
do. I'd love that
yeah.
one vote.
If you get one vote, yeah. So
Great.
that's just the way I look at it. I just dread the next few months because it's also, I will say Kamala has a very good social media operation going on because I'm sometimes on Reddit or and it's like, and I'm sure there's bots posting the exact same glowing, thing about Kamala Harris. I mean, so they've been really pumping that up in the line. They got a couple $100 million, so why not? But I don't think it's necessarily like, what do you call it? Green. I don't know if it's grassroots or it's just a very organized campaign of bots and influencers. But it's definitely she spiked it up. So,
Sure.
but
Yeah, Albert, what do you see on that? Am I way off in terms of my assessment of it? Or?
No, I mean, you're both correct. Going back to Kamala's, primary performance in 2020, it's just like it was abysmal. I mean, she barely got 1% of the vote and whatnot. I mean, she opens her mouth and you want to vomit over the stuff that she comes out of her mouth at the moment. And then on the other side, you have Trump that just doesn't grow up. He just doesn't grow up. But when it comes down to who I pick for a president, I try to get away from the characters in the primaries and the actual election and look at who their cabinet position people are, who they're selected for cabinet. Because that's really where the decision and the policy is going to come from. In 2016, I absolutely loved Trump's cabinet. Didn't really like Trump all that much, but his cabinet was much stronger than I thought Hillary Clinton was. And same thing for 2020. Although in 2020 he did decide to fire everybody and put in some clowns, but
small detail
again. The foreign policy issues that Biden. I just knew that Biden was going to fumble on, became such a problem in the last couple of years. And then looking at Kamala Harris, I see even worse decisions coming from her side, So for me, it's one of those the lesser of two evils right now. And I mean, if there was a viable third candidate, I would certainly be voting for a viable third candidate, but and for the election at the moment, looking at the numbers in the Electoral College and, this race really boiling down to Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, all run by Democratic governors and Democratic, governments. I think that Kamala has the edge at the moment.
Tracy?
As far as, I mean, I think this whole thing is a sham, to be honest with you. I mean, literally, she's not president now. We didn't see, Biden succeed to her, but suddenly she's the Democratic nominee, and yet nobody's voted for her. So when it is kind of a coup. Even I hate to use that word that we've been seeing on social media, but it kind of actually is, because she really hasn't there. Everybody thought it was going to be Biden. They just kind of slid her in real slyly. So if I was a Democrat, I would kind of be irked about this. Shouldn't we have a primary and see who do we want to be our person of nomination?
Right. It's more of a coronation than a democracy, right? I mean, it's really.
And it should leave a bad taste in people's mouths.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You don't go through, this whole process and then your vote not count, or you have no say regardless of the party that you're in, and then just say, this is your candidate and you're going to like it. And, here's another $200 million from God knows who. And this is just the way it's going to be. This is who we're selecting, and that's it.
As much as you hate Trump, the guy he did win primaries.
Yeah.
That's
he
can
and even this time he had Haley give him a hard time in some states. But the only thing I'd say on another thing on Kamala is if let's say that Biden said he's not running and the vice president passed away or something, and she was not VP, she would not be in the top 10 potential Democratic contenders for this job. And I think so if they want, maybe it's good to have someone. I don't think she'd be running the show, but maybe they like that. Maybe the DNC likes having someone that they can, use. So
well, of course. I mean, it's a money game at the moment. The donors are spending outrageous amounts of money. They're going to pile in another $200 million into Wisconsin alone for Kamala, and those kind of investments require influence. It's just
we've really devolved into tribalism, right?
Sure. But it's always been like that, Tony. It's just because of social media, you see it more than you usually would have. If we had social media back in the 80s and 90s, you would have seen just as bad of things happen.
Same thing. Okay.
Jim Grant just had an interview with Kofinas, and he made Dimitri asked him, is this unprecedented? And I think Jim rightly kind of just said, no, it's unusual. We're not used to this, but it's not. He brought up the example of 1968, which I was young then, but I remember, that there was rioting, there was, people, National Guard shooting students on campuses and everything in the late 60s, early 70s. It's a very divisive time. And the 70s weren't I love the 70s, but they weren't particularly a good time economically for a lot of America. And there was a lot of division back then. I totally agree with Alberto. I'm so glad that they didn't have social media when I was young, for a variety of reasons. But yeah, it's oh, and then Jim also brought up the post-Civil War, the latter half of the 19th century, where you had congressmen, pistol whipping each other in Congress, or you had, duels and things like that. So, every generation wants to think, oh, this is the worst ever, and it's not the worst division ever. When people start talking, I hate when people say, oh, when are we having our Civil War? I'm like, just shut up. I hate that kind of talk. I don't think there's going to be a Civil War.
I have friends that get into that same thing. They're like, this is the worst. It's never been like this. And I'm like, well, we had presidents assassinated. We had race wars.
Right.
If you go back in history, you can actually see cycles of hard times. And this is no different. It's just amplified in your face because it's on the TV or telephone.
I don't think this is a unique time in terms of divisiveness, but I think it is a fairly, I have to rethink my politics, but I think it's a fairly unique time in terms of kind of anointing someone to be president.
Yeah.
Or at least
do you think there was a lot of people were like, why did Trump agree to such an early debate? And, it makes you wonder if they knew Biden was not going to make it another 6 months and they wanted to kind of admit, I don't know how much thought these guys are putting into it. I imagine a lot because there's so much money and powers involved. Is this what the DNC had planned, to showcase Joe's weakness and to have the obvious choice be Kamala? I don't know. I mean, because there's, a lot of the criticism I've read of this pick of Kamala has come from people on the left of the Democratic Party too. They're not happy with it. So I don't know. I don't know. So that there's a lot of questions. I can't imagine. Now, if you just look at social media and you look at the news, you would think that, that was kind of a joke how everyone is so energized by Kamala. I made a joke about it. Like, there's millions of people, just clapping hands and holding hands and chanting for Kamala because there's so many posts like that. I mean, literally, that's what I'm saying. All over Reddit or on Twitter, there's people, oh my gosh, I was in Florida and there was a procession of golf carts for Kamala. This is amazing, but you see the exact same post, with slight variations a million times, and you go, wait a minute, is this real or is this
right? It's
made up? I don't know, but they're good at it.
Yeah, I know of nobody. Now I live in Texas, but I live in Houston, and it's a pretty blue city, and I don't know of anybody who is just excited for Kamala Harris. So, I think there's that bump that she's somebody new. Do I think that the DNC set up Trump to waste Biden? Maybe. I think that's possible, but honestly, I think Trump just wanted to get on and debate. He just
that may
wanted
be
to
true.
waste Biden.
Yeah.
He's a very competitive guy, right? So I think
it's good she's not 80 years old, like you said. So that is one plus you can check on your list of boxes. But
it is, yeah.
But younger doesn't necessarily mean good leader, So
no. I'm just waiting for her to put Buttigieg on the ticket. I know Albert says that's not going to happen, but
I doubt it. I think it'll be Shapiro or I think my leading choice would have been Shapiro obviously for taking Pennsylvania. Bashir out of Kentucky, he's like the most normal Democrat they have. I don't know why he's
Bashir,
not.
He's in the South. He's a Democrat. He's pretty normal.
If Democrats were serious about being centrist and more normal, I mean, this guy would have been an excellent presidential pick. I mean, he would have landslided Trump, but whatever.
I think you're right. And Shapiro has some sexual harassment allegations or something against him, doesn't he?
Who doesn't in DC?
Okay,
Biden he had allegations against him, and when she was running against Biden, Kamala Harris said she believed the women when they said that they were inappropriately touched. I've posted that years ago when it came out. So, yeah, everybody's got, I mean, maybe Kamala doesn't have allegations against her, but Biden and Trump and they all, who doesn't, go back Clinton, probably go back to most presidents.
Yeah, that's all fair. That's fair. I don't know about Kentucky. I don't know the guy for whether he has allegations or not. He seems pretty clean cut. He seems pretty sincere, and he seems like a very good politician.
You don't win the southern states statewide, being a Democrat, unless you are squeaky clean and play ball with both sides. That's just how it works in the South.
Yeah, that's fair. In terms of U.S. domestic politics, like the major issues we've talked about over the past few months are, abortion is going to be a big issue on the left. The border is going to be a big issue on the right. Are there any surprise issues you think coming out over the next couple of months?
No, I think abortion and economics is going to be 1 and 2. I don't think she wants to talk about foreign affairs all that much because she doesn't really have anything to talk about. She certainly doesn't want to talk about the border.
She flew to Guatemala or Nicaragua or something.
Yeah.
So she has it.
I mean, why even stir that up when you know that abortion is a winning issue for you, and you have Yellen, faking numbers to make the economy look good. So why not use that? I mean, those are the 2 issues that she should focus on, and I don't think anything else is going to come up from out of that camp.
Yeah, I just want to, before we go on, I just want to make sure that I'm agreeing with Albert that the macro data in the US is not real, but I don't agree that any macro data in any country is real. So this isn't specific to the US. This isn't, I just don't believe it. From my days at The Economist, I saw too much of the meat grinder, and I just don't believe macroeconomic data. So we'll just go on from there. I mean, I just want you to understand my bias is not necessarily political. It's just against statistics ministries. So, okay, Tracy, what do you see as issues? Like, are there any issues that we're not paying, that we don't know of right now that are going to come up over the next couple of months?
Well, as far as candidates are concerned, or as far as
just
what?
the U.S. population, things going to come up, and are there any surprises out there? Do you think?
Well, there's always surprises out there. We just don't know them yet.
What is there not to know?
That's why there's surprises. Well, I think Trump's an open book. You know what he is. He's brash. He's immature. He's not my favorite person whatsoever. But that's besides the point. My opinion doesn't really matter. He's the nominee, so that is what it is. I think what's interesting is I think Buttigieg. I think it's very interesting that it seems to be a lot of the popular opinion, just going by what I notice on social media, really like him. Now, do I think he's going to be a viable candidate? That's, not up to me to decide, but it does seem like there is a very big movement for him. And perhaps that's because people felt like they couldn't choose their nominee for president. So maybe they're trying to rally their opinion to make a choice for vice president. That's just my thoughts. I think the DNC conference will be very, very interesting because there's a lot of rumors surrounding that Kamala may or may not end up being the nominee. So I think all kind of eyes are on that. Let's see what happens there.
Well, she has enough delegates pledged now that she has the nomination, so there's nobody else. So she is going to be the nominee for sure at this point.
Rudy, what do you think about that? What are you seeing any domestic issues that we're not talking about right now that could come up over the next few months?
Well, I'm always most concerned about war, and I think what's one way to get a country united for the current leader is to have a war, and it's amazing we haven't gotten into one directly in the last year or two. We're doing everything by proxy, kind of like we used to back in the original Cold War. But I don't know. I used to say my number one issue is which candidate is less likely to get us into World War III. And I had, the 2016 version of Trump, I would have said, yeah, that's him. But the 2024 version, he's very, he talks things about wiping, Iran off, off the map if something I mean, I know he's hyperbolic like me. So, but that's my main concern, is that something war related, and I wouldn't put it past either party to, engineer a conflict to try, to win an election. I mean, it's infinite money and power involved. So I don't put anything past these guys, either party. And so that's it. I'm more concerned about us escalating our involvement in the various explosions going on.
Okay, so let's go down that path. So, your most extreme scenario, somebody's going to start a war before the election to galvanize the U.S. Is it with Russia? Is it with Iran? Is it with Venezuela? Is it with China? Like, where do you think the focus is?
I mean, obviously it's under Biden, it's been Ukraine, and then now it's Israel, and that's been really touchy for the Democrats because there's a lot of protesting against Israel's behavior in Gaza towards the people that aren't terrorists, but Trump, I don't think Trump's any really much better than that. I mean, I think it's like Ukraine and Israel are 51st and 52nd U.S. states, and I think that we should be fixing. There's so many things we should be fixing here before we try and solve. I think the Israeli-Palestinian situation is almost unsolvable. I mean, I don't know what the answer is there. And as for Ukraine, I have not been a huge, I don't think Putin plans to take over Europe, but I got very smart people that disagree, and so I'm not a real war hawk on that. And I used to be a real Cold War hawk back in the day, but then I grew up, and it's like, I mean, we're talking existential threat here with probably the one nation on earth that could wipe us out is Russia, and we're like doing everything, and we've been doing this since Obama. I have tweets from 2016 or something about why are we kicking sand in Putin's face like this? I mean, it was all the time. It's like, I personally am so weird. I think we should be allied with Russia and with Iran and with even a country like China, because we do have certain issues that we share with them. I always like to make bad jokes about, I remember when the Iranians flew those planes into the Twin Towers, it wasn't the Iranians, you know what I mean? A lot, and
Right.
so anyway, yeah, I don't know. I just don't want us to see get into a stupid war. Hey, I'm not a pacifist. If they're coming up the beach here, I'll fight and die. But I think there's an article from a couple of years ago that I keep thinking of, and the headline is something like, Ukraine is a minor issue in Scranton, but people say that, the economy, something's wrong with America. It's not working anymore for most people, And if Scranton, PA was thriving and all these other countries, I mean, look at Baltimore, look at Chicago, look at LA. If that was, I mean, you've got like a third world scene in many cities in America, and yet we're spending all this time and treasure and money over in other countries, trying to fix them. And I don't know, or I don't know what we're trying to do in these cases. I mean, like Afghanistan, what do? We build a school and then they come in and blow it up. Well, we need some schools built in the United States. And I think you need a candidate that someday there's going to be one like that. And I've mentioned Reagan before, who was, I mean, I've explained in the past, the 70s were a bad time. Nixon resigned. We lost the war in Vietnam. You had, I think a mini 9/11 was the failed hostage rescue mission in Iran when the Iran hostages were there.
Everyone forgets about that, Rudy. Operation Eagle Claw, I think it was called.
Yeah. And so and then 3 Mile Island fails. And I brought all these things up, that'll happen, boom, boom, boom. And this is after the 60s where you have RFK and you have Malcolm X and Martin Luther King all shot within 5 years and murdered. And so, that's 60s and 70s, it had great music, but there was a lot of strife going on back then. And Jimmy Carter, God bless him, but he just didn't have the charisma, I think, to get Americans pumped up. They were really bummed out, and for good reason. They felt like America was failing. And then here you get Reagan, and I'm not defending all of Reagan's policies or anything like that. I'm just saying, as a man, as a personality, he came in, and he was famous like Trump. He'd been a governor, he'd been a famous actor. but he was inclusive. He didn't demonize the people who hated him. And people called, Reagan a Nazi and all that. He's
Bad
going to
stuff.
start World
Yep.
War III. And just like they did with Trump in 2016. And it didn't work because people looked at him and go, you know what? The guy, I think he was a very sort of uniting figure. He had a lot of blue collar Democrats that supported him. Now, whether he ended up, like the 2016 Trump, who was running, was not the guy is not the guy who became president. That was two different guys. If you remember, he was like bashing, was it Ted Cruz or Rubio for accepting Goldman Sachs and all that. And then what does he do? He puts in a bunch of
his
Goldman
wife,
guys, in his first thing. But I'm just saying we need a leader that doesn't just hate on his opponents. You need to be someone self-confident. You need to have a sense of humor, self-deprecating. Reagan had all that, and he also got shot, 2 or 3 months into his term. And I think that gave him a lot of a sympathy, or a lot of people that didn't like him gave him a break on that. I think if the hostage rescue mission that under Carter had succeeded, I think that Carter probably, would have won. You know what I mean? It's like these little things and quirks of history. But I'm saying we need a leader who's inclusive and cares about Americans. I've said, look, someone's asked me, what do you do if you're president? I said, I'll go on TV and I would look America in the eye and say, you know what? I want you all to know, whether you vote for me or not, I care more about America than I do about any other country. And I'm going to deal with our problems in America as my number one priority. And I don't think we've been doing that. I think a lot of people don't feel like we've been doing that for a long time.
A lot of people don't. I think a lot of people are very cynical. Tracy, can you unmute yourself? Tracy.
Whoops, sorry. Vivek kind of ran on that platform, right? And yet it didn't work, sadly. That's the thing. I think there's just so much money behind these candidates and of interest groups, and of whether that's, Silicon Valley money, or that's DC money, or that's New York money, or that's lobby money. Kind of, I think a lot of American voices, regular American voices, kind of get drowned out in this sort of power play.
Yep.
It's hard to argue against what Rudy was saying, because I've been vocal about hundreds of billions of dollars flowing into Ukraine, while U.S. businesses are just, I think the bankruptcy rates have been the highest historically, and the rate of bankruptcies in America, it's just unbelievable to me. How do you
let me interrupt you here. My small company has still not been paid our employee retention tax credits from 2021. Okay. Those were designed to keep employment in my company during COVID, and the IRS has not paid my company and hundreds of thousands of other companies the money owed since 2021. But it's very easy to send hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine. I think that's why a lot of small business people are upset, because they haven't paid us for 4 years now, and those claims are now being put under a microscope after waiting for 4 years for this money. But Ukraine, the master salesman for Ukraine comes to DC, has a couple conversations, gets another $20-30 billion. This is the frustration that Rudy and Tracy and you, it's not just small businesses, it's people. We see our resources going offshore, and plain Americans are like, look, I just want to be able to go to the mall without being mugged. It's pretty simple, I think.
You should change your address to Kiev and see how fast you get your funds.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I'd have them next month.
The issue, what Rudy had brought up about unifying candidates and like Reagan and so on and so forth. I just don't think that. I think that time is gone right now, especially because, again, the weaponization of political narratives in social media right now. There is no centrists that are allowed to be on either side of the political spectrum. Either you're a Democrat and follow this litmus test, or you're a Republican and you follow the Trump litmus test. And there's just, I don't see where anyone as a centrist could, sit there and prosper in U.S. politics. Even for myself, there's some issues that I would agree with the Democrats, and there's other issues I agree with the Republicans. And if I say one or the other, I immediately get labeled as a MAGA guy, or a never Trumper, or so on and so forth. It's just we're not there yet. We have a long way to go until a unifying factor comes in. Sadly, to be honest.
Again, I think it's a demographic issue. I think baby boomers have a lot of disposable income and a lot of time on their hand, and it pushes them to extremes in terms of their views. And then that's kind of dripping down into other parts of the population. I could be wrong. That's just my thesis. I just want to, before we move off of geopolitics, I want to, Rudy said something interesting about we should ally with China, or China should be an ally, or something like that. I find the Russia one and the Iran one less kind of surprising, because I've heard people say that for years. With China, I'm interested in your guys' views on that.
Well, the only reason I threw that in. Oh, sorry. The only reason I threw China in there is because we have China and Russia have a huge terrorism problem with the Wahhabi, which is Saudi Arabia, basically. So that's what I'm thinking. There should be cooperation on that. Obviously, they're not going to be an ally, and Russia's not going to be an ally either. But we don't need to keep, poking them with a stick, which I think we've been doing forever. Now we've let since '92 or whatever, we've sold China the rope to hang us with, because all these guys that go, whether it's Musk or Schwartzman or Fink, all these guys, they worship China, and I've said before, I think that most big company CEOs in America, they wouldn't mind a communist system at all if it's a Chinese communist system. They wouldn't mind having re-education camps and social scores, and as long as they were left alone to make their money. I don't think they care about America. They're global, and they care about money, and they're very different than the small businessmen like yourself, or the many that I know who run small businesses, and they're very patriotic. They tend to be, and they're not happy with how things are going. But that's the only reason I threw China in. And Russia, it's one of the few countries it's one of the few major countries we really haven't, we actually invaded them in 1917. So I don't see any reason to pick a fight with them. I mean,
and we lost.
And Iran. Here's the thing about Iran. Iran's been 2 weeks away from a nuclear weapon for like 40 years. I remember the hostage crisis. People are like, why are they chanting death to America? Americans never put themselves in other countries' shoes. Most Americans don't. They had a president in like 1953 that us and the English overthrew, and we put the Shah in, and the Shah was so bad that they went with the mullahs, which was a huge mistake in hindsight. But at the time, they thought, what are we going to do? We got to get rid of the Shah. And so, if Iran came over in 1953 to the United States and overthrew Dwight Eisenhower and put in this brutal dictator, I'd hate Iran too, And so I think I don't know if there's any way to get past that, but I'm just saying there's a reason, there's a reason sometimes people hate us. And it's not because they hate our freedoms, as Bush used to say. It's because of stuff that we've done in the past. Even Bin Laden, he had an interview before 9/11 where it was 60 Minutes, I think, and he laid out why he was declaring war on America, and it was largely because of our actions in Saudi Arabia, having troops in Saudi Arabia after the Iraq War or during the Iraq War, and things like that really insulted him as a devout Muslim. That if you're a fundamentalist Christian and this bunch of Saudis come over and camp in your church, you're gonna be a little upset, I would think. People need to put themselves in other people's shoes. Anyway, that's all on China. Yeah, they're very different. They have their own agenda.
Maybe we mischaracterize the word ally and more define it as symbiotic relationships. Would be probably a better term, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Do we have that now? Yeah, minimal at best. But I've always advocated for a symbiotic relationship with China and Russia. I mean, there's trade to be done. There's security measures like Rudy was mentioning, exchange of science. Now, of course, The flip side of that would be, the American military complex and keeping the military superiority. They need to be fed. We need to materialize enemies for them to obliterate every 10 to 20 years. So it's, there's challenges, but I prefer symbiotic relationships where skirmishes are very minimal rather than on a path towards, multipolarity and ultimate world war, which I don't think that's happening in the next, 50 years. But, 50 years turns into 20, 20 turns into 10, and all of a sudden, your grandchildren have problems.
Yeah, I don't think, I just want to make sure neither of you guys are saying there isn't a security risk with China. There aren't, say, problems and the US doesn't need to be prepared. You're not saying anything like that. You're just saying, hey, we need to have a good faith relationship with these guys and see how we can get along. Is that, I mean, I don't want to read too much into what you're saying, but.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't want to put words in Rudy's mouth, but that's what I'm saying. The issue is mutual respect, right? So you have, you have Mattis when he came in there, and he was so respected by Xi and the Chinese that, they took pictures with him and distributed around Asia to say, hey, look at this great American general. We're buddies with him. In comes the Biden administration, and they mock Blinken, and they mock Biden openly.
I volunteered to go to Anchorage on my own dime to correct the trajectory of that. Like, I really volunteered that because I don't know why my hand went up on there, but I volunteered that because Blinken was such a mess. And, I could send a couple emails and make a couple phone calls and probably get things with China on the right path. But instead, we have people out there, and you guys know who the usual suspects are, who are always advocating for some war with China. And these guys they act like salespeople for defense contractors. And it's just like, do I want a war with China? No. Do I want China to, aggressively take over Asia or steal our IP or do cyber attacks? Absolutely not. And we should, be on the right footing to defend against that. But are there good discussions we can have with China? Yeah, and I think they're our largest trade partner, so it makes sense to have at least a decent relationship with them. Rudy,
yeah, and let's
go ahead.
Let's be honest. Like Yellen talking to the Chinese, they coordinate on economic policy, right? This is a global world. They have dialogue and they talk between each other.
Yep. Rudy,
I think if you want a good way to look at foreign policy, I highly recommend people should read George Washington's farewell address, because he takes a good part of it there and he discusses it. And I've posted it. Maybe I'll post it again today. And he basically says, no permanent alliances and no permanent enmities, and he says, treat everyone with respect. He says, these other countries, they have their own interests. We have ours, and some people say, oh, well, what does Washington know? It's a very different world now. And it certainly is, but he certainly knew about existential threats. He would have been hung if they had captured him at any time. So I highly recommend that farewell address and Dwight Eisenhower's farewell address are two things every American should read, and probably 99.9% have not.
You're right. You just tweeted about Eisenhower this morning, I think. But part of what you're saying, Rudy, every time I hear about the US-UK supposed special relationship, I just kind of want to vomit, because, there is, I don't believe there's a special relationship there. I don't think the UK has a lot to offer to the US. Their intelligence is okay. They were one of the first major intelligence organizations to be penetrated by the Soviets.
Yeah. And
they've been full of holes ever since then. So I don't know what the UK offers us. And whenever I hear people in media talk about the special relationship, or people in the UK, they love to mention it a lot. It's an absolute joke, and I really don't think there should be anything there because of what Washington said about permanent relationships. So, hey guys, let's move on from this to kind of Fed Treasury managed economy speak, because I know that you guys have a lot to say about that. So, Rudy, you love to bang on the Fed, and I love that. So can you kind of give us your overview of where you think we are in terms of Fed Treasury managed economy? Are we in full economic management mode? Those sorts of things.
Oh, absolutely. There's all the talk about, Yellen playing her games. They want to win the election. and I don't blame them. And the Fed just, they're going to be ramping up QE again at some point. We're kind of in an unsustainable point here, and unfortunately, and I don't want to think this, but all signs lead to high inflation. I think I don't think they have any other. I hate when people say we have no choice but to inflate, because I think we do have a choice. Inflation is a default, is a point I always try and make. And so you're either going to get half back of what you're owed from the government, or you're going to get it all back nominally, and it's going to buy half as much. And I think that's the path we're on. They will. I said never underestimate how crazy these guys will go to defend the current kleptocracy, as I call it. And I think that, to save the billionaires, like they did in 2008 and 2020, I think a lot of that was done to save hedge funds and other people far more wealthy than us. I think they're going to do whatever it takes to keep. They can't let stocks plunge like 50% like in 2008. Now, maybe they're not omnipotent, but I was mentioning to Alberto before, I think these guys are so crazy that I know they've probably been doing it surreptitiously or through other ways, but I would not be surprised to have them. And some of them, I think Yellen's mentioned it, they want to buy stocks, and so if you have an infinite money printer
Like
that buys
Japan.
stocks in a decline,
Like Japan, because they
well,
don't
yeah,
like
and
15%
let's
of
say,
the ETF market, right?
right. And let's say they say, oh, we're never going to do that. Well, what's to stop them from saying, hey, Japan, why don't you buy some, or Swiss National Bank? Well, they cut, we're basically the Fed's a global central bank, really. In fact, in many cases, I think they care more about foreign central banks than they do about, Joe Sixpack. I don't know, me, you want to talk about any aspect of Fed policy, you want to talk about, inflation, or you want to talk about inflation targeting, which is that insane policy they went to after 2019, where they said, oh no, we had like 1.5% inflation, so now we want 2.5 or 3 or 4. Let's see, are you muted? Were you?
No, Tony, you're muted.
Sorry, how about negative 15% inflation targeting? I think a lot of people in the middle class would be.
Well, I ask periodically, I keep retweeting the same thing to Austin Goolsbee, where he said, we're people, we're not going to be prices aren't going lower. That would be deflation. And I said, dude, I asked him, I said, hey, Mr. Goolsbee, based on your inflation targeting that, Jim Bullard was the big proponent of, shouldn't we have a period now of deflation to get back onto trend? And of course he never replies. And no one asks that question, but it's obvious, and meanwhile we get Krugman and all these other guys going, hey, the inflation problem is gone. Well, I like to post a chart of CPI, a semi-log chart, and I say number goes up, and it's a vertical chart,
Always.
So its rate of change does not matter to people. It's levels, price levels, and that's something
exactly
that
right.
everyone ignores on, I use CNBC as my whipping post, but yeah, it's absurd.
Yeah.
So whatever you guys want to talk
I
about.
spoke at
everybody. Sorry.
I spoke at the Aspen Institute, and I think 2010 at some summer event that they had, and Goolsbee was there. And before that, I really thought he was an impressive economist. He would never remember me, but after a short chat, completely unimpressed. And I see him as more of a stand-up comic than an actual economist. Unfortunately, he's a Fed governor. But these are the types of people who we have managing our monetary policy. Some of them are actually very qualified people. Some of them are not.
Mhm.
And I sincerely don't think that Goolsbee is qualified to do what he's doing.
Unelected, unaccountable, and they get 14-year terms.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
Tracy, sorry, I didn't mean it. Sorry, go ahead, Albert.
To Rudy's point about buying stocks, I know that Yellen's already told the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund to buy stocks when his time was right. I know that she's had these conversations with other foreign banks, right, and foreign and hedge funds. That's they're already doing it. They can't do it overtly, but certainly they're already doing that. And then that much of that is explained of why these valuations of some of these companies is absurd levels right now.
Yeah, Tracy, sorry, what were you going to say?
It was just back to inflation. I just think it's really interesting that everybody is posting on Twitter right now this true inflation. Whereas at one point, it was just kind of an ingredient to, you know, what Rudy said, where it's not the rate, it's not the rate of change, it's the actual, you know, what actually inflation is, and everybody's posting these trueflation charts that say that we're in deflation and the Fed needs to lower rates right now because we're in deflation, because the trueflation is at 1.34%. I'm just looked at somebody's last post.
Yeah.
And, you know, and we're below the Fed's target rate, and, you know,
Okay. So here's a simple calculation.
but again, this was just kind of in response to, you know, what Rudy was saying, where, you know, nobody cares about, no regular consumer cares about the rate of change.
Nobody does. So let's do this. Let's take the Q1 of 2020 price levels and let's add 2% inflation annualized on top of that. And then let's manage price levels back to that level, right? I mean, is that crazy?
Yes, to them it is, because that would require deflation, which is their biggest boogeyman. That's the one thing they economists run and, you know, screaming if they hear it. It's the boogeyman. There's a great quote that's, you know, of course, simplistic, but sometimes it's simplistic truth. He says, the guy named Darth Powell says, you know, deflation is to wealthy people what inflation is to everybody else, you know, and I think that, you know, that's very true.
Because it hits their equity valuations, right? I mean, that's
Exactly. And half
it
America
hits their
owns
equity
none.
valuations.
They've used inflation for profits and earnings. I mean, everything's been inflated, so now everyone's earnings looks stellar. But you know,
Yeah, well, Greg Weldon's good about bringing that up, like on consumer spending, you know, that they don't adjust for inflation. And he's, you know, even if you use their numbers, and of course, getting back to Tracy on the trueflation, I joke about that because someone was in a bragging way saying how trueflation is so highly correlated to the CPI. And of course, that's, I think, what it's trying to do to get people to be able to front run the CPI. But the CPI is nonsense. You know, I mean, it's
more than
it
that.
is. And I have many examples I've sent out over the years. I mean, for 25 years, car prices didn't go up because of
course they
hedonic
didn't.
quality adjustments.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of thing. And then most people have no idea. Most people, I guarantee you, that even think about this, which is probably a fraction. I mean, to think about it in terms of how it's calculated, they think that you get the price from this year and the price from last year, and whatever the percentage changes, that's the thing. No, that's not it. That they have hedonic quality adjustments, they have substitution, they have weird weightings, they have all sorts of tricks. And I think it's obvious that they have a huge, you know, what did Munger say about incentives? You know, they have a huge incentive to understate the actual cost of living. Anybody who thinks their cost of living is only going up 3% a year, you know, God bless you, you know, or 2.6 or whatever. I mean, you get my, you know, there's so many anecdotal things. My auto insurance went up 41% with no changes, no accidents, no nothing. I get people, mine went up 30, mine went up 50. You know, I mean, it's crazy, all this stuff. And I don't even know if some of that's in the CPI. Some of our biggest expenses don't even go in the CPI. You know, the CPI, I don't think you can trust the CPI. Just trust your checkbook. They need to have, now obviously Alberto's basket of goods is different from mine and different from Tracy's, but you could do a couple different baskets. I think that the hedonic, once they threw hedonics in there in the 90s, and I think the purpose was to understate, it lost all relevance to normal Americans, you know, because you don't think, oh, this pencil is you know, better than that one. They actually did this with shirts. They if you think it's how stupid it is, and I'll send this out again. The BLS, which does the CPI, is they had a thing where they estimated the hedonic quality improvements of a cotton, say, versus a polyester, or long sleeve versus short sleeve shirts. And they go through this incredible math calculation to determine the hedonic quality adjustment, because if you switch from cotton to a polyester shirt, I swear to God, and it's insane, and it's what they do for every item just about, you know, so.
Because they don't feel it. They have cost of living adjustments in their government salaries.
Sure.
And they don't feel it. And I used to manage a lot of economists at two very large economics firms, and these guys would rather defend their theory than admit to what's in front of their eyes.
Of course.
That's how economists are. I've met maybe 3 economists in my life who actually view what's in the world around them as real and more important than what the theory says?
I've just got into many arguments about that very thing, that people, economists just don't want to, they don't deviate from what they know of the past 30, 40 years of what, when they studied economics. And we're just in a different time at this moment, different set of rules. And,
It's information transparency, Albert. Economic theory was made up when there wasn't transparent information, and now we have relatively immediate transparent information. So economics as a discipline, honestly, data science is more relevant than economics.
Yeah.
So
there's a great paper from Robert Schiller that I'm retweeting right now. Let's see, where he talks about, oh, there it is. He did a survey of economists and then all individuals on, what is your biggest gripe about inflation? And so, the vast majority of everyone's 77% said inflation hurts my real buying power. It makes me poorer. 77% of the overall selected that, and only 12% of the economists selected it. The most popular response for the economists was, inflation causes a lot of inconvenience. I find it harder to comparison shop. I feel I have to avoid holding too much cash, etc. In other words, they don't see inflation the way we do. We see inflation as, how am I going to afford this? And they see it as, oh, it's just going to tweak my math model a little bit. These guys.
Theoretically, it's inconvenient. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I could go on for hours about how economics isn't real. Let's move on to market dysfunction. I think, Tracy, you see it in oil markets. Albert, you see it in everything. Rudy, you see it in everything. What do you think the kind of most glaring area of market dysfunction is right now? Is it tech valuations, or, what is it?
The amount of weight that the Mag 7 companies have on the S&P is absolutely just astonishing.
It's like 34% or something.
It's something along those lines. But I mean, just look at Nvidia. The rise of Nvidia over the last week, equals to all of Japan's valuation. You know what I mean? It's just they're just silly valuations that are just not real. They're actually quite dangerous, to be honest with you. I mean, it's just when these things get unwound, how's the Fed going to prop this pig up for that long? They're just so unbelievable to me. It's like a cartoon.
Yep. So tech valuations is your vote?
Oh, absolutely. The Mag 7 tech valuations is the biggest just clown show that I've ever seen.
Rudy, what do you think?
Directly related to what Alberta just said is what Mike Green brings up a lot is the passive flows and the incredible market distortions that are caused by that, which of course leads to his Alberto's Mag 7 weirdness or whatever you want to call it. And that'll work in reverse someday too. I think people don't realize that there's how many, guys turning 65 or 70 every day, and they got to start taking out of their IRA. And I don't know, there's going to be some selling, and it doesn't take much selling of these because the non-passive guys have mostly been put out of business. So I don't know who they're going to be selling to in some cases, and maybe the bids are much lower. But I would say that's my
fund, the actively managed Magellan fund. That stuff just couldn't fly today, right?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't even use any I don't use any mutual funds and I use ETFs just for trading. But yeah, I think a lot of the guys that used to be, the Oak Marks and the, guys like that, they're just not around. And the guys that are around are guys that basically hug the index, that's they look good because they've just been basically buying the same 5-7 stocks that Alberto was talking about.
Yep. Tracy, what's your best proxy for market dysfunction?
Well, I think I have to go back to kind of Mike Green's theory about passive investing. And you have all of these giant ETFs that everybody's pension funds and everybody's 401ks just go into. And when market dynamics change and one sector becomes more weighted than the other, then they're automatically forced to reallocate that ETF or, you know, that mutual fund that you're investing in. And so I think that's kind of, you know, where those major flows come, are those passive investing vehicles that, again, you know, as weightings change, they're forced to change the weight within those prospective products.
Yeah, I mean, it all creates kind of a laziness, right? I mean, you know, you have, whether it's passive products or whether it's the Mag 7, there's kind of this laziness from investors, you know, to just put it somewhere that they really don't have to do that much work. They just kind of know that the indexers are going to be followed, and, you know, they're looking at beta or alpha or whatever. And so they're going to do some things at the edges, but for the most part, there seems to me this almost sleepwalk in markets right now where people are excited, but honestly, they're not doing that much work because they're just following the passive flows or following the Mag 7 flows.
Yeah, but the risk is being flat-footed like that, and it goes backwards, and nobody's at the helm, and panic selling begins. And that's a risk there. But
Isn't a lot of it too like the there's no choice if you a company you're in a target date fund or something, because for legal reasons you have to you know, put it, you know, you're not going to get sued for putting someone in an SPX fund, right?
Right.
So
Or
yeah.
NTLT or whatever, right? I mean, it's
Right. And those laws over the years, I mean, I'm not an authority on it, but someone like Mike or you guys might be, where yeah, there's no choice. You have a selection of funds and they all do basically the same sort of market cap weighted thing, and that's it. So a lot of people are just forced into it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we've got the Fed funds rate at what, 5.3? We've got the 10-year right now trading below 4% yield. It's just, there's just so much weirdness in markets right now. It's I just don't get it. So, you know, so is there kind of a reckoning coming after the election? Is there something that will happen for markets to change?
I mean, there's at some point math has to come back into the equation here, instead of just, you know, political aspirations of Yellen and Biden and Harris and whatnot. I mean, at some point, like, these valuations have to correct themselves. It's just not. I can't see it being sustainable going into 2025.
Yeah, we've had two 50% S&P drops in the last, well, just over 20 years, you know, and nobody, you don't think it's possible. I mean, I was saying, oh, maybe they buy stocks, but I'm just throwing that out. I don't know if that would even save them. I think, and I said before, you know, be careful what you wish for on the rate cuts, because if you look at the 2001 to 2003 cycle and you look at the 0809 rate cut cycle, the market was plunging all during those rate cuts. So
That's right.
you know, be careful. It's usually a sign that something's, you know, bad, not good.
That's
And
right. I keep
and as
saying
for
that to
the,
people as well.
yeah, what's the 2-year yield at today? I haven't looked that up. But anyway, like 4.2
or
or something like
something.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying, you know, I've heard it before, like guy like Tom McClellan or other guys, you know, just replace the FOMC with the 2-year yield and go with that, you know. And we could avoid all this stupid drama every day. What's the Fed gonna do, you know? And I think it was McClellan who says the 2-year generally leads the Fed funds rate anyway. It's like it's almost a perfect, you know, little bit forward correlation. So, you know, we could get rid of all the theater like Fed Day, you know.
Right. Yeah,
But
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 that won't
algos
happen.
love they love that. Algorithms that trade love Fed Day and Yellen talking and, you know, CPI numbers. They love those. They love to play those things.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, I know this could lead to a long discussion, but just who owns the Fed?
I got, yeah, I actually have that. I think it was Wall Street on Parade, which, by the way, is an excellent site for Wall Street information. I think the two biggest ones the last time, and they had to do an FOIA, and even then, you know, the Fed sometimes just refuses to respond to Freedom of Information Act things. But I think it was Citigroup, and oh, this is the New York Fed. Okay, so that is a private. Even Joseph Wang, Fed guy, says it's a private organization that can print its own money. So, and there's no supervision of it, really. I mean, other than, and then we've got a goofball like John Williams running it. So he runs this incredibly powerful, I think, incredibly corrupt private organization that has its own police force and, can print money. So that's a great deal. Yeah. Anyway, that was.
Yeah, I mean, I was told by congressional guys that like the Fed charter can just be changed by a typewriter anytime they want to change it. There's no real oversight on them.
Yeah,
I think we should audit the Fed.
Hmm?
I think we should audit the Fed and see how scared they get.
Oh, there's a famous guy that kept saying that. Yeah. So, Ron Paul. Yeah, we should. But if you say that, you're a crazed conspiracy theorist. You're a wacko. Why? Trust but verify. Why not do that? And then they will say, "Oh, we are audited. We are audited." Yeah, right. Have Jim Grant go in there with a fine tooth comb. Let's see what they're doing.
Yeah. Or to circle it back to our initial domestic politics issue, we could say you're weird if you.
Oh, that's
You're weird. So
I like a lot of people were posting comments on that, showing various Democratic supporters who were far weirder than anything JD Vance has said or done. But yeah.
Guys, this has been a great discussion all around the world. It's exactly what I'd hoped for. So Rudy, thank you so much for your time. Albert, Tracy, thank you so much for all that you contribute here. Guys, thanks very much. Have a great day.